In this video, I'm going to give you a basic introduction to Photoshop, show you how to open a file in Photoshop, give you a guided tour at some of the basic tools and features that you'll need to use, and I'll also show you how to save your files in Photoshop when you're finished working on them. So first we're going to open Photoshop, the program. So you're going to click Finder down here and then click on Applications, and all the Adobe software is at the top because it's in alphabetical order. Find Photoshop and click on that folder, and then inside there you'll have the actual program here that you can launch. So instead of just double clicking on it though, you want to create a shortcut on your computer if you don't already have one. So click and drag that icon and see if you can put it on your dock, and if it'll let you put it on your dock, then you can do that. If it won't let you put it on the dock, you can also click and drag it and put a shortcut on the desktop. That way in the future, when you open your computer, you can just double click on that icon and that will open Photoshop right away. It's a little bit faster. So let's double click on that and we're going to open Photoshop. And then the next thing you need to do is go in your Finder and locate your file that you're going to be editing. So for this example, I'm going to go to my folder with my first name and last name, the shared folder where all of your images should be also in your own folder. I'm going to go to the photography folder that I created, and I'm going to click here on my project folder, and the photos that you're going to edit are always your top 10 photos. So I'm going to click on my top 10 folder, and I have one picture in here waiting for me to edit it. And so I'm going to take this picture and I just drag it to Photoshop, to the icon here on my dock, and it would open it that way. But if you don't have it on your dock, I want to show you how to open a file from within Photoshop. So now this is the Photoshop program here. It's open, and this is all you're going to see when you first open Photoshop. And to open a file for editing, you're going to click File and Import, File Open. And it's going to pull up a window where you can navigate and find the same file that I just showed you a second ago. So inside my folders here, I'm going to find photography folder, and then the current assignment that I'm working on. My top 10s, these are the ones that I've chosen for editing. I've only got one so far, so I'll just click on this and open that one. So I'll say open, and then that's going to open the photo within Photoshop. So here it is. Now you might see this panel in Photoshop when you first open a file, but you might not. So I'm going to close that, collapse that window so that you see only this, just in case, so that I can show you how to access that panel. That's an important panel. It's called the Layers panel, and it's located right here. And if you click on that, then it pulls up the Layers panel, and you can see that we've got our picture right here, and by default it becomes the background layer, and this layer is locked. So at this point I'm going to explain how layers work in case you're new to Photoshop. So this layer represents one layer of information, and I can make a new layer and put new information on the second layer. Whichever window is blue is the active layer. So let's say I have this new layer that I created active, and I take the paintbrush tool and I paint some lines on that layer. This is actually two different layers, and the background layer was not affected by those lines. Only this layer was affected. Those paint strokes are on that layer. I'm going to click this little icon and make a third layer now, and right here I'm going to choose a different color. Let's choose a green, and now I'm going to paint with the paintbrush tool. I'm going to paint on this layer, and that makes some other lines on there. So now you can see this layer has the green strokes on it, this layer has the brown strokes on it, and this layer has the image on it. So that's just kind of a basic demonstration of how layers work. As you keep adding layers and putting new things on each layer, you can view them all at the same time, but you can also edit each layer independently, and that's the advantage of layers, is you can do different things to different parts of your image. And we'll get more into that layer later, but I just wanted you to be able to understand what layers are and how they work. And each of these layers, you can throw them away individually by clicking on the layer and dragging it down to this trash can here. And so I could take this one and put it in the trash can. And as you saw, by clicking these little icons, that just toggles if the layer is visible or not. So if you click that eye, it makes it invisible. If you click it again, now that layer is visible. And if I just want to get rid of the layer, then I just throw it in the trash can. Something else that you want to do when you edit photos is you always want to make a duplicate of whatever photo you're working on, so that you don't ruin the photo and you can never get back to the original. Because if you're doing something when you're editing and you don't like how it looks, and you didn't save an original version of it, you might not be able to get to that original. So the way you duplicate a layer, and you'll always do this as the first step when you start editing a picture, is you're going to right click on that background layer of the image and you just say duplicate layer. And you can just call it, leave it as it defaults as background copy, or you can rename that and say layer 2, or you could call it whatever you want to keep track of your workflow, however you do things. So now we've got the same thing on 2 layers, and the reason for that is because let's say we wanted to do a little bit of editing. Let's do a little bit of hue and saturation. So if I changed this image and then I decided I didn't like it and I made a whole bunch of changes and it would be hard to get back to the original, all I would have to do is throw that away or make it invisible, and I can get back to the original picture. So always save as a background copy, always make a copy of the background so that you're working on a duplicate image instead of the original. So for now, I'm just going to throw this away, and I'm going to make another duplicate layer, and then we'll start doing our editing. Well, actually, that's going to be a future lesson. We're just going to work with the background right now. I'm just going to show you a few other tools and things you can do. The background is locked. In order to do anything with the background, you'll need to bring that lock to the trash can. So I'm just going to unlock that layer, and I'm going to show you a few of these basic tools over here. So this first one is the move tool, and that lets you move the image around within the canvas. Now I'm going to zoom out so you can see a little bit better what's happening. The keyboard shortcut to zoom in and out is Command plus or Command minus. You can also click on this tool right here, and you can click and drag and zoom in to a certain area, and that's how the zoom works. But if you need to zoom out, Command minus and Command plus is the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to zoom out here and drag this window a little bit bigger so that you can see that we are working on a canvas. And when I use this move tool and move the image around, you can see it moves the image within the canvas, and so I'm actually cropping my image if I'm not careful. So I just want to show you how that tool works, but just be aware that you're working on a canvas that's a certain size. One of the other basic tools that you want to know about with editing in Photoshop, and one of the first steps you'll do probably, is cropping your image, and this is the crop tool right here. The crop tool is useful because you can crop out certain parts of your picture that you don't want to include. Maybe you didn't like the way that the photo was framed when you originally took the photo, or maybe the photo is tilted a little bit, and you can fix that with the crop tool. So let's pretend I want to exclude this ugly, stuff on the shore right here, and I just want to include this area up here. I can crop and make a selection around my picture like this. I can also move it around. I can change the shape of the area that I'm cropping, and I can also rotate it. So you see how this picture is tilted a little bit? I can fix that right now with the crop tool. I can rotate this window and try to match the angle that the picture was taken. And then when you get it just how you want it, then you push return on your keyboard, and it will complete the cropping process. And that's actually another really good reason to shoot in the highest quality settings, because if you crop your picture smaller, you'll still have a good high resolution photo, as opposed to if you had a smaller image and you crop it down, then it's starting to get really pixelated at that point. So that is how you use the crop tool. There's another way to rotate your image as well, and that's with the transform tool. And there's a shortcut for that tool. You just press Command T, and then it creates a bounding box around your image. And so if I wanted to rotate or move this image or make it bigger or smaller, then I can use this tool to change it without having to crop it. And if I hover right here, then the arrow turns to that kind of curved arrow thing, and I could rotate the picture like this. I could also crop. If I wanted to make the picture bigger, then I could do this, and then the canvas itself would crop the image. So that is the transform tool, and when you're finished with that action, then you also hit enter, and it will finalize the changes that you made. Another shortcut that you'll want to know about with Photoshop is how to undo something. And the way the keyboard shortcut for undoing is Command Option Z. And if you hold all three of those keys at the same time, it will undo the last action that you did. And if you press it a bunch of times, it will keep going back for about 20 steps, I think. So you can undo that way, and that's Command Option Z. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to save a file. So let's pretend we did all of our editing and we're finished editing, and we're ready to save our file. You're going to click File, Save As, and then obviously you're going to give it a name, so we'll call this School Building, just for an example. And then in your top 10 folder is where you're going to save this. And notice right here, this file extension is .psd. That's a Photoshop file. So if I save this file and then I try to open it again, it's going to open it in Photoshop like this, and it will still have all the different layers and things that I've been working on. And so that's if I want to continue working on the image in Photoshop later. So if I'm doing some edits and I have to stop in the middle of my process, then I want to save a Photoshop file like this. And so I would say School Building, Photoshop Document, and I'll click Save, and then just click OK when that box comes up. And then now in the Finder, you can see that the file is saved. Photography 22, top 10. So here's School Building, Photoshop Document. So if I open it, then this is exactly what will open up with all of the layers that I was working on. If you're finished editing and you know you're completely done editing the image, then you can do File, Save As, and instead of saving as a Photoshop document, PSD, you're going to click down here and change the format and just save it as a flattened file. So you could save it as a JPEG image or as a PNG. So I'm just going to do a JPEG, and then it's going to flatten the image, just kind of take a picture of everything, so it won't preserve all the layers. It's just going to take a picture of what it looks like and save a really high resolution version of that image. So I'll name it, title it what I want to, make sure it's a JPEG extension, and then I save that in my top 10. And it'll ask what quality, always maximum, largest file size, maximum quality, and then click OK. And then now we'll check in Finder, and now I have a JPEG of my edited school building, the original unedited photo, and I also have the Photoshop file. So that's kind of a basic introduction into Photoshop.